So I'm going to talk a little bit about Spirit Island, and everything I'm going to share with you is something that you can take with you. I come from a multi-ethnic background. My mother moved up to the cities in 1968 from southern Minnesota, ran into my dad in the 1970s, was never supposed to have kids, and lo and behold, here I am. So my grandma on my mother's side would call me a smoke Norwegian because I was so dark in the summertime. And then, of course, I had a lot of lovely names on my dad's side of the family, but they were all meant with love and kindness. But what I talk about here, I want you to take it as your own. And I'm going to explain that because I know we're in a funny time where we try to homogenize yet categorize all at the same time. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So in our cultural tradition, things can be different and the same simultaneously. And the word that we have for that is a word that we use for a lot of different things, but that word waka. And what that means is sacred, holy, mysterious, or unfathomable. The human mind cannot understand it. And so things can be different and the same at the same time. So when I talk about Spirit Island, whether you have First Nation, American Indian ancestry, I'm Gen X, I say some older terms, but those are also our legal terms, I will add. And I am a strong believer that everybody's indigenous. I don't like that word to divide, and I'll say why. Because it doesn't matter if you came here through immigration or colonization or however you came here, you have a geographic location where your people, where the earth understands you and your language, your home language. The earth understands you there. And if one of us came from Mars, we all came from Mars, you see. So when I say indigenous, to me, I think two-leggeds, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it's for American Indian, First Nations, Dakota specifically right here. So as two-leggeds, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little while, this island that is you don't see here anymore. And in our creation stories, and in most creation stories throughout the world, human beings are usually created last. Not always, but most often. And to get into this discussion about Spirit Island, I do have to touch on a really icky, touchy subject, race. Because I want you to understand this through the Dakota lens a little bit. I want you to see it through the Dakota lens, because Dakota-led doesn't mean Dakota only. It does not mean that. Dakota means us, we, working together, people live alike, act alike, and agree to help one another in hard times. That's what Dakota means in a nutshell. You Google it, it's going to say allies. It means more than that. There's a deeper philosophical meaning to that. So everything that's green out here and grows, that's Watoto. That is the things that the race of people that grow and are green. And in the race of people that grow and are green, the Watoto, you have different nations: cottonwood, oak, pine, dandelions, even buckthorn is in there for you land people. Those are nations within a race of people with as much agency, and in fact, they're our older brothers, and I'll explain that. Does anyone have a dog, cat, anything? Okay. Now, I had a dog named Rufus, who had 3 legs where I lived when I was in high school. But most dogs usually have 4 legs, right? Buffalo has 4 legs. A bear, 4 legs. A mouse has 4 legs. Giraffe, 4 legs. Elephant, 4 legs. We call those the Wahoo Dopa, the 4-leggeds. It's a race of people. Each one is different in the sense that you have the Buffalo Nation, the Elk Nation, the Grizzly Bear Nation, the Corgi Nation, okay, dogs, but or your cat. And so they have that uniqueness, but that's a race of people. I know that's hard to understand, but I'm trying to get you to the Dakota lens here. And the next thing, you see these guys flying around here. We're all afraid of those pigeons. We treat them really bad. That's a really, that's a tragedy that is, Shakespearean, the rock pigeon. The rock pigeon doesn't live in the wild anymore. It needs to be with us, yet we don't want it there, yet we took it out of the wild and domesticated it, and once we no longer had a use for it, it could never fully go wild again, so it's always where human beings are. It's kind of a tragic tale. But that rock pigeon and that eagle you might see, and your hummingbird at the feeder, your woodpecker, or your crane or heron. Those are all the Wahupakoza. That is a race of people. And they're the race of people that beat their wings to fly. I know that's hard to understand because we're in the age of me, I, my all the time. And so the next we have this water. And in the water, we have everything that lives in it. It could be a mussel shell or a mussel. It could be a fish. It could be a leech. It could be a snail. It could be otters. I know they have 4 legs. I had the same argument when I was young. Muskrats, beavers, even loons and cormorants. We call that Minioyate. That is the water people. And that's a race of people. And each one has its unique nationhood, language. And the other thing I will add, as we go down the line, each one has a covenant, has a wopche, has a law with creation that it has to fulfill. And that's why they're here. And they stay within that wopche, that covenant. The next, you have all the things that are creepy and crawly. The wabadushka, that's the bugs, snakes, pollinators count. I know they fly. I had the same argument when I was younger. Lizards, they count as wabadushka. They got 4 legs. They're far cuter than snakes in my mind. I didn't think they belonged with snakes. I don't make the rules. I just am told. That's a race of people, and they each have their nationhood. Oh, I forgot to tell you, bats are part of the flyers. And Linnaeus probably is very upset about it. He's the Swede who made our classification system. And then all these things were living here, and they're just fine. Just fine. And lo and behold comes these guys. And that's the Wahunopa, us, the 2-legged. And so we're in a funny era where we question science. Now, science has been used to hurt people in the past. Eugenics used to hurt people in the past. Science has been used to, you've interpreted different readings or studies or what have you to kind of have bias, all those things. But if you believe in science, you believe the earth is round, and you believe that it's the 3rd planet from the sun and we orbit a star, things like that is science. So from the Dakota perspective, doesn't matter how much melanin you might have in your skin or don't have, the shape of your eye, the color of your eye, your hair, the coarseness of your hair, whether it's straight or curly, you're all a 2-legged. We're all 2-leggeds. I have a mother from a far different background than my father, and somehow everything works because we're all one. But we knew this a long time. So science has affirmed our tradition. We also said we were star people. Used to really make fun of us. We say we're star people. We have a whole story where we come from. That island's tied to it, actually. And all these Indians are crazy. They think they're star people. They're from the stars. Never mind the fact that we're on a planet orbiting a star in a galaxy called the Milky Way. But we're the goofy ones, See, we don't take ourselves out of creation in our historical concepts. So as 2-leggeds, maybe you're Irish, maybe you're Moroccan, maybe you're Laotian, it doesn't matter. You're 2-legged. And so what I'm going to share belongs to you as a 2-legged. And just like when this site changed and they used this site for monetary gain and harness that power that creation put here, when the earth rumbled and the falls collapsed, Dakota were just as much at fault in the eyes of creation, in our worldview, as the ones who did it. Because we're 2-leggeds. We're 2-legged. So this island here, this whole area, this Owámniyomni, doesn't mean waterfall. Doesn't mean San Anthony Falls. What it's talking about is, Owámni is a whirlwind, okay? And when we pluralize our language, Yomni, you kind of reduplicate it. Owámniyomni is talking about all the whirlpools in the water. And it doesn't mean turbulent water, because we have another word for that. The Missouri River, we call Minishoshe, as turbulent water. This is Owámniyomni. It's different. And this falls was a place of power. It was the only falls on the river. And it was believed that sacred beings inhabited the water, the land, and the air that we can't see unless they want us to see them. And there's especially powerful beings that live in this river here. And I'm going to save that talk for another time. But where this island was at, Witawanagi, Spirit Island, That was believed where it was a place of creation for those powerful beings. And those powerful beings were our medicine teachers. And there's a whole story and traditions based on those beings. Where me as a West River, South Dakota kid, I could jump across the river in my backyard called the White River. We could just jump across it. But anyway, that's another story. But here, that island, people would come here. Because in our way of life, you could follow a couple pathways. You could do one or the other or both. We have the teachings of the water and the teachings of the sky. And people who follow the teachings of the water would come here. Pilgrimage. We have places that we do that for places of the sky, places like Bear Butte, South Dakota, Devil's Tower, Wyoming, Thunder Butte, North Dakota. Those are places where we would pilgrimage. We did that back then. I know, we weren't wandering vagabonds in the plains. We knew everything and all things. It's funny how we taught everybody to grow their corn, beans, and squash, and we taught everybody to survive. And later in life, all these guys, it's a good thing we wound up here, saved them from themselves. No, we had big cities. So this island here, which I will say where we're at, is 1805 treaty land. Really important to understand that. Everybody's a treaty person here. Whether you're a heritage person or not, everybody's a treaty person if you live here. 1805, treaty land right here. And so they would come here and they would pilgrimage and leave offerings. And those offerings I'm going to refrain from saying, but it was a place of sacredness. Now, because we're the last to be created, we believe we don't have any power. And what is that? I mean, look at us all sitting here. We're not, in our language, hachola, that's how we say it, naked. We sit here with clothes on. We have clothes on because we'd be cold out there in that rain if we didn't have clothes. Now, before we had polyester and acrylic, what did we make that out of? Cotton, wool, hide. Where'd we get that from? Plants and animal relatives, right? So we're very pitiful. You know, I have a bro who has a lot of body hair, but it ain't going to help him out there, you know. And we don't have sharp teeth. We don't have claws. We can run long and far, but we can't run very fast. And so our weapon, our defenders, is big brain. And so we depend on everything else. As the younger brother, we would always give homage and thanks to everything. So this island, when they took it down and destroyed it in the 1950s, everyone said, oh, they destroyed Spirit Island. They did. They took it physically down. But what made it sacred remains. Because in our teaching, if it was a sacred place, two-leggeds did not have the power to change any of that. We don't have that power. Only the creation does. And so you might not see that island there, but the power is still there. Now, we do something nachma. So, that they'll come here in secret and leave offerings or say thanks. Has anybody ever been on a date before in their life? Okay. Has anybody got a mother or a father a gift for Father's Day, Mother's Day? Okay. Now, if I was to go on a date or I was going to give you something and I had a bouquet of flowers and I go, here you go, there probably won't be a date number 2, right? Or if you see mom or dad, or you say, there you go, dad, there you go. That's not a respectful way to do it. But over here on this western bank of the Mississippi, we've got nowhere where we can leave offerings in a respectful way. We've got to throw it over that giant fence. Everybody's afraid if that fence comes down, people are just going to walk right into the river and drown by the hundreds. I'm not kidding you. This is the argument. Yet when you go across the other side at Father Hennepin Park, there's a riparian edge where you can walk down to the water. You could put your hand in the water and talk to it like a relative. Because the whole river has agency in our worldview, just like this story I tell about the two-leggeds. And so Peggy asked me to talk about this, and it's important because this, and I mean this with the utmost respect, we have elder respects in our family, and Peggy's old enough to be my mother. In fact, my mother used to work for the Minneapolis Community Development Agency, so I used to go in the building over here when I would come visit Minnesota and come visit her. And she worked in the finance department. I'm supposed to tell everybody that. I don't know. But when I first met Peggy, she wanted to do these tours, and because this place means something so much to her, because she can feel this place. When she started to do the redevelopment of these areas, she did something a lot of people don't do. She had prayers and offerings for the land. Now, did she say Dakota language in there? No. But as a two-legged, she used the words and the language of our heart to say, we're going to try to do something good here. Help us, work with us. Thank you. That's a reciprocal relationship. And years ago, and I won't say whom because I'll get in trouble. She can get after me. We've had a U.S. congressman. No one's going to want to live down there. Nothing good will ever come from that area. Well, you come down here on a Saturday in the middle of June at noon, try to find a place to park, right? There's others like Peggy. And so Peggy, who I work with, Owámniyomni Okhódayapi, we're a small nonprofit that came from Friends of the Falls that was founded by some very beautiful people to protect this site. And somewhere along the journey there, they decided to become Dakota-led. And I hired my boss. And it's really tough in Indian country because of the N-word, nepotism. But we're all kind of related or in-laws to one another. And she's technically my sister-in-law from my previous wife. But in our way, you don't have ex-in-laws. They're your in-laws for life. And so she used to be president at Prairie Island Tribal Indian Community, Shelley Buck. She's nationally known for the work that she does. Paul Rayaltz and some others courted her to come a little nonprofit, Friends of the Falls, that was now transitioning to Dakota-led with their board and some other things. Now think back to what I said at the beginning, because I speak cyclically versus linearly. Dakota-led doesn't mean Dakota only. We have Ojibways working with us. We have non-heritage people. I don't like that term non-Indian very much. It's kind of a loaded word. I kind of say non-heritage because that's the ones that, maybe they were left out. I mean, heck, my father's not even on my birth certificate. People are still arguing about that. I'm 50 years old. But we try to bring everyone together. What does Dakota-led mean at Owámniyomni Okhódayapi, Friends of the Falls in Dakota? It means that when Dakotas eat, everybody eats. It means everybody's included. It means consensus driven decision making. Think about that. You work with the nonprofits here in Minneapolis. I know the directors of all of them. They're all my age, and I've known them for many years. But they're not tribal nations. And at our organization, everything we do, the 4 Dakota communities, Prairie Island, Shakopee, Lower Sioux, and Upper Sioux, the 4 federally recognized tribes here in Minnesota, have say. Have say. And so what does that mean? Hey, we're going to do this program over here, blah, 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 blah. Upper Sioux. Well, Barry, maybe you shouldn't do that because, so-and-so. What'd they say? Oh, Grandma said we shouldn't. That's consensus-driven decision-making. Sometimes we want to do things without asking, should we? So through that consensus-driven decision-making, it's a longer, harder process, but it's a robust, ethical process. So they meet 4 times a year quarterly. We go there once or twice a year, give them updates. They also, their tribal councils, appoint somebody in our tribal working group. We also started a Dakota Knowledge Keepers where we compensate knowledge keepers in our community for their time. Usually they would get a gas card or something. We pay a market rate. We were the first ones to do that, and that was Shelley Buck. Tribal Working Group, that was Shelley Buck. Those 2 groups have to agree on anything we do before we do this restoration work. This restoration work would be open to everybody who's the 2-legged, but it's not for us. It's for the flyers. It's for the crawlers. It's for the swimmers. It's for the creepy crawlies. That sounds so horrible in English, but yeah. Nobody wants them crawling across your face at night. Anyway, it's for them. And we'll get the trickle-down benefit. As the youngest brother, as the youngest relative in creation, we'll get the benefit of that site. 5.2 acres, Army Corps of Engineer, is we're taking over 3 acres of park board land. So 8 acres in total. That'll be tall grass prairie, right? Downtown Minneapolis. Is there any birders here? There are some phenomenal birds that come down here. They're actually going to have a place to eat and rest in the daytime because that's a death zone. Viking Stadium. I'm a fan, but I'm also a birder. But at Spirit Island, we do know that a lot of these buildings here were built with the limestone from Spirit Island. We can't put those back. Things happen. Nobody's going like this. Nobody's saying, you did this. Nobody, you did this. Not in our organization. Every time you do that, there's 3 fingers pointing right back at you, saying, what can you do different? Or who can you engage? There's none of that going on. So Dakota-led decision-making is, well, what do we do? Is it all in the buildings? No, actually, it's not. We got a phenomenal worker, Christy Duvall. She actually found where they buried a lot of Spirit Island. It's part of it's in that stone jetty. A lot of it is in that road across where the cul-de-sac is, where that job trailer is down below. And now we have to have the discussion with the tribes. Do we return that Spirit Island back to where it was? Because this lock is permanently closed. That's how I met Peggy. And she wanted to do some tours. And we were going to do it once, and then they became weekly. And I made a relative with Peggy. And that's how we do it in our community, in the sense that, Barry, I need you here. All right, I'll be there. Well, that's not on your job duties. No, it's different now. That's how you make relatives in our cultural. So that's a lot, far too much, because this is about Peggy. And I didn't know who she was till I Googled her. When I was like, I gotta, about the 3rd tour I had with Peggy, this lady's like a Marvel superhero, and she knows everything, and she knows what to do. She just has an answer. That's eldership. We really admire that in our culture. Our modern day culture doesn't value it as much as it should. But I Googled her, and I was like, this is I don't want to say a glass ceiling breaker, smasher, destroyer, laying pathways. I have all daughters. I have a son too, but he's on my list right now. But I have all daughters. And I know I look 29, but I have 3 granddaughters and another one on the way. And their life is going to be easier because of the work that Peggy did and the stuff that she's been doing. And so she's getting honored today. She honored our work by wanting to honor this site. And just like years ago, somebody said no one's going to want to live down there. Maybe one day our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren that doesn't know us, maybe they heard about us, will say, well, at least they tried their best to put it back to the way it was. Because it never will be that. But that's a lesson. That's a lesson. And nobody's evil at the times. They thought they were developing. That's a whole nother level 300 course we could talk about for hours. But Peggy decided to take this night here, where she's being honored, to showcase something dear to her heart. And that's a type of selflessness that we need more of in more places. And so that's really all I have, unless you have questions or anyone has questions.
I just have one more thing for you. So first of all, can we all just say thank you and join me in a round of applause for Barry's time? Thank you.
You're going to make me blush.
But I also I love that you kind of handed that off to Peggy, because that is the theme of the next conversation we're going to have, is we really don't exist on our own. We exist in community. We exist in relationship. And we really wanted to set the table with the idea of like challenging what is family, what is home, what is relationship with land and nature, and how do we decide what we get to do and what we own? What is our relationship to that? We are stewards of the things that we are responsible for. And we do get to question and ask ourselves, what is the point of what we're doing? And what is the impact we're having? I had the benefit of talking to Barry beforehand, and we settled on sharing a value, which is the sacred middle way. That we can see there are tides of change that sometimes come with pain and challenge that carve the way for the next phase. And we want to hold the space for a different way of being, not to conquer with one way of doing it than the other. Not that we only need to do things via consensus or drive through and conquer, but how do we weave? How do we do that? And we do that in community. We do that in relationship. So I love that he set the table for us, just really recognizing and understanding we are next to a power center, an earth power center. And so I do want to just thank you one more time and invite Peggy up. And while we do that, thank you, Barry. I'm going to invite you guys to get a little loosened up, and we're going to breathe into that power center together. So if you're comfortable getting both of your feet on the ground, that is the best for posture. But we're going to do a really simple somatic practice today. If you've met me before, you know I love mental health tools. I collect them. I like to normalize them. I use them every day. It takes work to be happy, healthy, and okay, and that's the work we need to do. But somatic tools are really about shifting in and not abandoning the sense of self, home within oneself, in your body. Really bringing your energy and awareness back into self. And the reason I love those tools too is because they're backed by science, most of them. Science is really great for those of us who love logical reasoning and reasons why things work. So we're going to do a really simple somatic practice that's truly kind of a nervous system reset. It stimulates your vagus nerve, which really affects your parasympathetic nervous system. So you can start with your left or your right side, it doesn't matter, but you'll take your hand up over your head, pull your head towards your shoulder, and gaze your eyes gently in the opposite direction and breathe naturally. Takes about 30 to 60 seconds of holding yourself in this place, and you'll find your body want to sigh or yawn. Bonus points if you make sound like, These are ways we bring a sense of home within ourselves and allow ourselves to be present with the idea of a large earth energy center out there in the river, drawing people to settle here in the first place, drawing people to continue to work with that river and develop alongside her. And we get to consider how time has passed and continued to shape our city, bringing us through the decades over time from when the island was destroyed to the 70s and the 80s when Minneapolis did not have its footing, similar to how we may feel today. When you feel settled, you'll shift to the opposite side, pulling your head gently towards your shoulder and breathing naturally. In the 80s especially, the downtown in this area was riddled with crime. There really wasn't a footing yet that stabilized the riverfront. And as Barry mentioned, there wasn't just one, but many who didn't believe that this corridor made sense to redevelop. We had old ruins and not a clear direction on what this part of the city could be. I'll welcome Peggy up here. You guys can keep stretching and moving around as you like, but my nervous system's calm. The parasympathetic nervous system really does just help short circuit calm, nervousness. But for me, with one of my kiddos, it's an anxiety stopper. So it's really good to have those things when you're feeling the energy to bring yourself into sense of presence. But Peggy, please come on up. I'm so happy to have you here today. We'll talk about when she started developing in general, but I'm going to make her go all the way back in time first. And I first just want you guys to join me in welcoming her with some applause. Do you want to give it a try and see if it works?
I think it works. Yep.
Works just fine. Yep. I require signals if you can't hear her because she's incredible. So please signal me, okay? Peggy, thank you so much for being here. I like to start these with some rapid fire questions so we both just get used to chatting. Is that okay?
Okay, go
All
for
right.
it.
What's your favorite breakfast?
Oh my God, yogurt and berries.
Do you like to cook or have someone cook for you?
Nobody cooks for me.
What's your favorite thing to read?
To read? Well, I love to read books, but I don't get around to it that often. So I'm mostly reading memos, things that are happening. Newspaper, keep me up to date. So
Do you have a favorite, what I would call sit spot? So we just talked about Spirit Island. I have a few places in nature. One for me is Gold Medal Park. I went there in labor with my daughter. It's just a special place for me. Do you have a favorite nature spot?
We have a place on the North Shore, and you can't beat that. It's really the more waves, the more wind, the better it gets. Yeah.
Are you someone who values routine or flexibility or a combination of both?
I'm pretty flexible. I don't get upset when things don't follow a straight path.
That makes sense in development. It tends to throw a wrench here or there.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard other people say this about you, so I just have to ask you if you can define it. What do you think your superpower is?
I don't give up. I just keep at it.
I love that about you.
Yeah.
So are you ready? Can we go back in time?
Sure.
Tell me, what is your first memory?
Oh my God. You know, I don't remember like being a baby or anything like that. I have a sister that claims she can remember being a baby, but I cannot. So my first memories are I was born in China, and I had a nanny, and I remember her just being so amazing, and it was just a happy time. So
When you were a child, do you remember thinking about what you wanted to be when you grew up or what you wanted your life to look like?
I didn't think about it very much. It just sort of happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time your family had to leave China and why?
Yeah. My mother was American. My dad was Chinese. They met at Carleton College. They married in China, and they intended to live there forever. That was the plan. But the Japanese War was happening, and he was a professor, and the college kept being pushed down the Yangtze River. And finally, but we ended up in a small village, really beautiful small village that I remember with great affection. But when the war got too close, my mother decided it was time to take us back to Minnesota to visit our relatives and get to know Minnesota. So we, the way they got supplies into China in those days was over the Himalayas, because they couldn't come the other way. That's where the Japanese were. So we hopped a plane that was bringing cargo in, and we flew out over the Himalayas. But my mother at that point was pregnant, and none of the refugee boats would take a pregnant woman. So we stayed in India for 6 months waiting for a boat. And finally, they chartered a Swedish boat that came, and they would take everybody, even pregnant women. So we got back to Minnesota 2 weeks before my brother was born. So, yeah.
And how old were you and your sister?
I was 4, she was 3.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I'm sure as a child, it's impossible to relate to what your mother was going through. Did she share at all how she related to that experience?
My mother was unflappable, and she just rolled with the punches. So I don't remember a lot of angst. She just knew it would turn out all right.
So your recollection, even as a child, is feeling safe through that experience.
I felt safe.
Yeah, and you had 2 rounds, right, of having to leave as a family?
Yes, because we came back. Being a refugee is one thing, but our kind of refugee was pretty privileged, because we came back and lived with my grandfather, who's a professor at Carleton and had a nice house. And, so I say I wasn't a normal refugee. But we stayed maybe 2.5 years in Northfield and decided to go back. My dad was still there. And we got back in 1948, which was bad timing, because in 1949, China fell to the communists. So I remember, I think we were the last refugee boat out of Shanghai.
Do you remember it feeling different that time, being a bit older and different environment?
Then I knew what was happening. I mean, there were bombs, and there were all kinds of things. But, you know, we came back to Northfield and it was fine.
What did you think of Minnesota? I mean, in both times moving back, I know you shared previously sense of safety, positivity being in a grandparent's home, but you know, what are some of your early memories of Minnesota?
It just seemed like we fit in. You know, people were nice to us. We lived across from the Carleton campus. It was, we just felt like we fit in. We didn't have any of the, you know, anxiety, I think, that people that don't have that kind of a base have as being refugees. We just went on with it.
Yeah, linked to the local state and family.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you decide to go to school for? And as you kind of progressed and developed and grew up, you know, what was your idea of what you thought you wanted to study and do?
You know, for a while, in high school, I took a lot of home economics, and I thought I want to be a fashion designer. And I was going to go to Iowa State and take fashion design. And I had a friend, we were all set to do that. But it didn't work out that way. And I went to the University of Minnesota, and I thought, well, maybe I'll be a social worker. And I just liked history, so I ended up being a history major, and I just kept following my nose.
What were the first jobs you took out of school?
I was a caseworker for Ramsey County Welfare, and it was an eye opener. I had a caseload of 30, and they all had to have multi problems in order to be in my caseload. So it was pretty interesting. It was
A segue into
great experience.
multidimensional issues for sure.
Yeah.
What led you to want to leave that work?
Well, I got married. My husband is a physician. When he finished his internship, I talked him into going in the Peace Corps. And we were sent to Iran. And it was a great experience, eye-opening. 2 years living in a Muslim country, learning how different things are, trying to get things done, and it didn't always happen. But it was a great experience. And then it was the Vietnam War. So my husband, Dave, was not thinking that he wanted to go to Vietnam. So one way out of that is to join the public health service. And so we pulled a lot of strings and got him into the public health service. And we were assigned to 2 years on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. And during that time, I thought, well, maybe I want to be a community development kind of person, maybe a social worker. But I had 2 kids. Our first child was born in Iran. Our second child was born on the Indian reservation. And so we had a, interesting time knitting our family together.
Yeah, I love that your love was really grounded initially in a desire to do community service. He loved you enough to say yes, to leave and to go on that adventure.
Yeah.
But then the two of you together, continuing to face what's going on in humanity and desire to care, to apply your skills, to do something about that.
Well, it just, you don't think these things out. They just sort of happen. And doors open, you go through them.
I'm going to make you slow down and talk to me a little bit about being pregnant and having babies in other countries. I do want to note, my other interviews were with men, and when I prepped with them in advance, they super related to their experience as a father, all of that. But we do get the chance with a wonderful woman like you to talk about some of these issues that women deal with all of the time. How do we go chasing the things that we believe we're here to do, and have the love we want to have, and have the family we want to have, and do that well? Most people, though, don't have their babies in other countries. That's got to be a unique experience. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it was definitely, I knew I was pregnant before we left for Iran. So I was able to bring some supplies with us.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, but we went to a very nice town with a good hospital, and I thought, this is going to be fine. But it was different to be, people kind of follow you around and kind of look at you and so forth. But mostly it was good.
Anything different than the second time around being on the Native American reservation? Was that a good experience?
Uh, yeah, it didn't have anything to do with being on the reservation, except that this baby was born 10 weeks early
Wow.
and almost died. And so we were in a little town of Kayenta, which the population, when we moved there, they said the population was 37. I think it was a little more than that. But anyway, so when I was in labor, we had to drive 90 miles to the nearest hospital. And it's a long story, but my baby came 10 weeks early and had lungs that did not expand. So they tried to get him out in the middle of the night in a 2-person airplane. And by that time, they knocked me out and I was gone. But the airplane came back, and my husband thought, well, the air was too thin, the baby died. And it turned out that they ran into a storm and they couldn't get through it. So they came back. This hospital was so small that for the runway, they had to get all the people out, the nurses, the doctors, the orderlies, and line their cars up along the runway so that they could find the way for the plane to go. So anyway, it all worked out. He stayed for some reason in 10 weeks in an incubator. And it wasn't much of an incubator. I think they used hot water bottles some of the time, but it all worked out.
Sounds like an actual miracle.
I think so.
And another testament of community that, like, literally we can only heal each other in community. We can only get things done in community. We need to show up and shine our light so that we can land and save each other.
Well, we were a very supportive community, wonderful people, all the way up and down. And so we're just thankful.
How do you relate to motherhood and mission in life?
Well, motherhood is the biggest mission, I believe. But being a good mother doesn't mean being narrowly focused on your child. It means being part of the world, and your child's part of the world. And so I don't think it's that different. Our children got dragged around lots of places, and I think it was good for them and good for us.
Yeah, you're certainly a special family. So as you guys were coming back and settling in Minnesota, what did that look like for you? Where did you land? What did you guys do?
Well, my husband got a residency in University of Minnesota. So we came back here and we were just normal family, a resident and 2 little kids. And so everything was fine, nursery school, this, that, playgroup. But when the kids were both in school, then I went back to school and got a master's in social work.
How did you feel after that?
I decided I didn't want to be a social worker. Yeah.
One of my teachers always says you sometimes need to live in a house with no windows to find out you need a house with windows. It's not going to work for you.
No, I loved studying what I studied, but I realized along the way that, and this kind of led into, I think, why I got into housing, that the most you can do for people is to give them a home. And if they don't have a home, a place to call home, it's not an organized way to be. And so I was naturally drawn to the field of housing, I think.
Yeah. So
affordable housing.
Yeah, I remember we were chatting once that you seemed to be okay, but had a growing discontent about how some of these projects were getting done, some questions on maybe we could create some more quality, affordable things. It didn't have to be so hard. Tell me about that. Tell me about the growing tension before you started.
Well, before I started, I was very involved in the League of Women Voters, and I co-chaired the housing committee with a friend of mine who's still a friend of mine who was part of our company. But as we went around and talked to officials as we were trying to put a paper together, we asked them, why is public housing so ugly? well, you're building the slums of tomorrow. Why don't they have porches? Why don't they have gables? And this bureaucrat looked at us and said, well, if you girls think it's so easy, why don't you try? So I started at first a small housing company with that friend, and we did 8 units of housing, but it was enough work. We got sued. We got neighborhood, but we learned a lot. And that friend decided, this is not for me. She became a builder. She built low-income housing, but she didn't like the politics of, getting the funding and so forth. So I teamed up with 2 other partners, and one of them's here, Linda. Raise your hand, Linda. Yeah, and that was critical to have the 2 partners, and we got along. We had complementary skills, I would say. We had an office that didn't have walls. We just all stayed in one big room and listened to everything everybody said. And we had a unique way of relating, and we were able to get things done. But we did small catalytic projects. We didn't go out and raise money from Wall Street to do our projects. We'd do 2 units here, 5 units there, 8 units there, once in a while 12. But
yeah, in our market now, we call it like traditional missing middle, frankly, which is best, I think, developed by community. Doesn't often have the space for the larger developers to play, but is exactly where community can produce and fit in.
I think most of our first projects were done in partnership with community groups. A lot on the West Bank and Stevens Square and there. But it's fun now because we drive around the city and we see little pockets where we did our work. We did 3 school sites. The city of Minneapolis was closing down some schools, and we bid on three school sites and got them. And that was huge, really. One we did senior housing, one we did townhomes, and one over in Southeast. The way we got the density they were looking for is we did auxiliary units, and that in those days that was a big leap. But it's worked out, and it's over. I drive by it all the time, and it worked. So it was 30 units. It was actually 50 units, and it worked.
Tell me about that first conversation, you and your husband or you and partner, when you bought that first site and decided to go for it. Was it a small conversation, a big conversation? You just did it?
Just did it.
Yeah, just went for it.
My husband didn't really want to know what I was up to. But he'd come to the closing and sign the papers, which was a good thing. But
once you got started, while you were doing, community development projects, you were partnering, it seems like you had the bug. You wanted to keep doing it. You were exceptionally motivated to keep producing, good projects.
Well, it was satisfying. And we paid a lot of attention to porches and gables and the things that I criticized the Public Housing Authority not to do. And we worked with great architects, and Julie Snow is here, and she was one of them. And then another architect, Paul Matson. But we were a small office, but we had a really big team, people that we trusted, architects, builders, lawyers. They're all people that we worked with over and over and over again, and we all got the mission. So Julie's here, and Julie did 2 projects right in this area. And so.
What was the key to succeeding in a cross-functional team like that?
What was the key? I don't know. There weren't a lot of conflicts. We just soldiered away and got it done.
One of the things I noted when we talked in advance too is you found your partners. You were really clear and in right relationship as you guys would negotiate what you were doing. Some people did elect to not necessarily grow as the companies grew, but the majority of your partners did. The majority of your partners internally and externally grew with the business, continued to do work together, continued to solve problems together. So truly built longer term relationships.
Well, we had long-term relationships. I think we kept our business going for what, Linda, 40 years? More. But we kept doing small projects, Some of them got as big as like 50 units, but they just kept going. And it's not that we didn't have failures, because there's some that we worked really hard on and they never happened. And so, it wasn't all always the way we wanted it to go. But in the end, I think we're very proud of what we did.
Yeah, I mean, I think we learned as much from the things that go wrong as we do the ones that work. And similar to trying to do, mission work and seeing what does and doesn't work, we can apply our energy, and sometimes it does or doesn't meet intended result. If we learn and grow,
Yeah.
that's the point.
No, sometimes these projects would take a right turn or a left turn, and that's just how it was. But you kept with it and figured it out.
So you were doing a lot of community development, a lot of affordable housing that was much needed in the city at the time. When you first entered the market, did the market want you there? Were you well received?
They hardly knew we were there. We did such small projects that people hardly knew. I think the project that I did with the partner that before I joined Brighton, we got sued, and we learned a lot. Then one of the other developers in the neighborhood didn't like what we were going to do, and so we learned.
Mm-hmm.
But project's still standing. It looks good.
Absolutely, those are big initiations in life into.
It's got a porch and a
business.
gable.
Perfect. We're sitting, I just want to share with everybody, I think you all know this, but we're sitting in a building that Peggy and her team developed. It's exceptional. But this is one of a number of buildings that you developed on this stretch. So going from I popped into the market, they barely knew I was here. You kept going because you had the bug. You loved what you were doing. What got you interested and got you over the river? How did you start, and what was the first investment that got you working up this Mississippi corridor?
Well, our first projects on the river were on the other side. We did the old Coca-Cola plant into some townhomes on the river. I'm really proud of what we did on East Hennepin. We saved some buildings that nobody else wanted to save. And as a result, I think you can now call it Old Town. But if some of the merchants had sued us and wanted us to tear down the building so we could have a parking lot for Surdyk's liquor sale, if we'd done that, it could not be called Old Town today. So we started on that side of the river. This side of the river, the mayor at that time was Sharon Sales Belton. She lives in Longfellow, and she'd drive the river road every day. And she'd say, those buildings on River Road, somebody's got to do something about them. They're just rotting. And they were. There was graffiti, dead pigeons. It was just a wasteland down here. So with Sharon's encouragement, we decided to take a swing at this side of the river. I remember we went to Chicago and Chicago was a little ahead of us in building loft units. And we took our team down to Chicago and toured, and we kind of decided, including the architect, we decided what we wanted to do. And the lenders weren't excited about lending, but we have found some brave lenders. And the real heroes, I think, were the early buyers that signed the purchase agreement and said, we want to live here in this godforsaken place. One of them was an architect, a very well-known architect, Bruce Abramson. And I think people said, if Bruce Abramson can live there, maybe I can too. I think Bruce was one of our first buyers that gave us. But one of my great stories is we had a groundbreaking for North Star Blanket. And we invited Martin Sabo, who was our congressman at that time. And he was really nice at the groundbreaking. But afterwards he went, hey, come here, I want to talk to you. And he said, I hate to tell you, but nobody's going to want to live in these things. And I said, your chief of staff just signed a purchase agreement. That was great. I loved that. Kathleen Anderson, there's a bench with her name down by the Stone Arch Bridge. But anyway.
Yeah, I think as a developer, we get to build ideas in our minds. We get to build them in spreadsheets and on plans. We get to build cohesive partnerships. And eventually a bank gives us money and we physically build it. It's unbelievable. It's actually magic. And that's the hardest thing to get people to connect to when they don't believe in the vision. When they don't believe that it's possible. They don't believe you can change the tides no matter what your spreadsheet says. Yeah. They don't believe it's going to happen. And that's what you faced starting development up the corridor.
Well, we had some courageous bankers too. I still remember their names. They believed in us, and we were able to do it. So we marched down the river. We did Stoner, North Star Lofts. Then Stone Arch was a vacant land where a mill had blown up. So we did that into condos. And then we did this building. And no, we did Washburn first. Washburn's next door. But then we did this building. And we didn't want to do this building. This was what they wanted to do, the Mill City Museum. The mayor and city council wanted this museum with the Minnesota Historical Society. And many, many developers looked at this space and backed down. So I always called us the developer of last resort on this building. And we took it on, and it's, it was worth saving for sure.
Why can you and your team make something work that other people can't? And why do they walk away when you walk forward?
I honestly don't know why they walked away. I thought this was a good opportunity. The city was behind it. It was historically important. I don't know why people walked away, but they did. And so we were the last resort.
Well, the developer of last resort certainly takes the cake in this case. You worked your way up. You started working on housing, shifting though from, you'd been doing a lot more affordable housing to starting to look at mixed income. I know you've got workforce housing over here. We have affordable housing over here. We also had condos for sale.
Yeah.
You also brought to downtown mixed use development, because that really wasn't happening as much either as you worked your way up the corridor, saying, I think uses can juxtapose. I think we can figure out how to make that work in a building. I know that was another hurdle to get over, both with what the city expected, with lenders, as well as getting folks to sign leases and agree they were going to do it.
Yeah. Well, it was imperative when you did these buildings that the ground floor be active and relate with the street. And so we had to do that. And we had some failures, and we had some people that stuck with us. And some of them are still here.
Yeah, I go back to it all happens in relationships. So I know when we prepped in advance too, it's easy for us to neglect the bankers, and we all want to care about one side of the story and not the others right now in society. But the reality being, someone needs to underwrite something, analyze risk, and agree. They got to do it too. They take a risk too alongside you. And in this case, you did have bankers that also fought on their side of the fence.
Yeah.
You had market rate tenants that were willing to pay those rates and come stabilize a building. Mm-hmm. I say that because we're sitting again in a mixed use building in an exceptional space. And what it takes to make spaces like this vibrant is a mix of investments, a mix of leaders stepping forward to say, I can't do all of it, but I can do this part. And we believe in the big vision and what those values are.
Well, we had buyers, early buyers. John Coles was one of them, who was the editor of the paper, and big visionary kind of guy, I think. And some people that really believed in this area, especially this building. One of them, I think John Coles had a party in this building when there were no elevators, and anyway, it was awful. But he encouraged us to do this. And one of our buyers said, there's a lot of history here. And she was aware of the indigenous connection and how there's a spiritual aspect to this. And it was Penny Winton. And she said, before we start, let's have a ceremony. So on a Saturday morning, we had a ceremony. We had somebody come in and smudge and do chanting and so forth. And that was fine with me. And we did it, and we got the buyers and so forth. But as they were building the building next door, the Washburn, all of a sudden things were going bad. The tools were breaking. The things they were working on weren't working right, and everybody was getting really frustrated. So Penny went and said, time to have another ceremony. So we did on a Saturday morning, and we invited all the workmen to come. And they were like, are you kidding? We're going to go on Saturday morning, and you're going to do this? And we said, well, it's not mandatory. You don't have to come. But most of them came, and we had a ceremony, and all the bad things stopped. And after the ceremony, seriously, an eagle flew by. And so I thought, well, maybe we did something good. But anyway, there's that element to this area that you can't ignore, I don't think.
How did you relate to the river as you were developing it? Did you have a relationship with it before, or did that kind of grow as you spent more and more time over here?
I think I've always known how important the river was, and of course we did things on the other bank. Yeah, no, the river is the river, and for the city to turn its back on the river is unbelievable. But for many years they did. It was a gravel pit. It was a wasteland. These buildings were falling down. The building Julie worked on was falling down. And so we were able to save part of it. She did old part and a new part, and they moved together. The architectural critic called it some kind of a rhapsody. I don't know, but it worked. And yeah.
I love that. I mean, I think we have continued work to do today as we consider our zoning, our buildings, the ecosystem along our river. And that's why we're so thankful to have Barry here too, and active work that we can support to step into further repair there as well. I love one of the things you shared with me while we were prepping is that as you were doing this work, it's like people didn't believe in our riverfront. But as you made your way up, the river herself came roaring back, and it became the main focus of like, why wouldn't we reorient our city back to where she focused in the first place?
Yeah, I think bringing these buildings back set the table for what Barry's group is doing. And that's the frosting on the cake, I think. And to think that the Army Corps of Engineers actually agreed to give up their 5.5 acres so that, and all the hardscape's going to be torn down, and that the park board is totally cooperative with the 3 acres that they own. And it's all coming together. And you know how cities are in politics and so forth. I'm hoping that this one doesn't fall apart, but it doesn't have the earmarks right now of anything that's going to fall apart. There's a lot of energy behind it, and I think it's going to happen.
I agree. I think it's really special. And I think it's why we want to sit and talk with you today and reorient to like, how do we consider what we do with our one precious life? What do we own? And over the course of getting to create something, what are we leaving for future generations?
Well, I think, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with future generations, with all the horrors that we're seeing now and climate and so forth. But I think we've honored the spirit of this place, and I think it'll be here no matter what. So
I think that's all we can do in the face of chaos.
Yeah.
Is choose our right action and do our best and hold that space for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'll be here. But I'm so thankful that Barry was able to come today, because he really set the table, and he's amazing.
When you think of all your projects, what you've done, and we're also talking about, ideas, life, values, do you have a favorite project or a favorite kind of moment when you think back?
There's so many. I can't say I loved doing what we did on the riverfront, but I loved some of the stuff we did. We had a brownfield in Prospect Park that came back. We had a little tiny project, just little things. I can't say what's my favorite, because they're all different, and they I'm not embarrassed of any of them. I can drive around the city today, look around, and in almost every corner of the city, we see something that we did, even though it's tiny. And I'm not embarrassed about any of them. They still look okay. And they have porches and gables.
I love what you champion. I think, and I started this practice with a somatic practice, because while I like a lot of meditation, I like to ground it in science too. In real estate, what you did then, we've now studied for decades to now know the science and the math behind why it's better for communities, why mixed income communities can do well, why access to parks and trails matter, access to nature matters, why a variety of services within walking distance matters, why an activated retail or something that connects with the community matters, why design that's at human scale and quality of materials matter to people's lives and their health. So you knew it before you knew it. But now we are left with a corridor and a part of the city that actually represents what I believe our state's core values are, which is why you felt at home landing here in the first place. You can be different and it's okay. You can be at home here alongside people that are different from you. And I appreciate too, again, Barry sharing that sentiment. We are all family here.
Yeah.
And we all get to relate to this great river. We all get to relate to one another and the society that we're in and consider how do we use our energy in our lives to contribute to something we feel good about when we drive around our cities.
It's a good city. And it's, it's a hard time now for commercial, and we hear all the stories. But you know what? 60,000 people live downtown. We've got vibrant corridors. We've got good bones in all kinds of parts of the city, and I believe that it'll come back. And now I think with all the chaos going on nationally, that a lot of people are focusing on what we have here because we want to do a good job here, not lose what we have. I see it with even our cultural organizations. The Guthrie had a mind-blowing fundraiser. The orchestra had a mind-blowing fundraiser. I mean, people are investing in what we have. And we don't feel like maybe right now we can do anything about the chaos nationally. But when it's all said and done, we want to be better here. So.
Yeah, I think what we can do to calm the chaos is to come together as a community.
Yeah.
Not every problem is a government or a business issue. Some of it is where we need to step into community and right relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you did that just in your life and being a human, but also by championing different relationships with people that are different than you, including at City Hall.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another reason when I look at why your projects worked. You picked long-term partners, you solved projects together, financial partners, people that are willing to invest in something different. But you also had people supporting you at City Hall and continuing to champion for what those projects looked like and believe in your work through the city. Is there anything we can take from that we can continue to apply instead of pulling apart from our cities? How do we build bridges to really focus on these issues and opportunities together?
Well, you can't get away from the politics. And we have to have people that understand the big picture. And we're fighting that right now in the city, I think, is to try and get a functioning government entity that will support big ideas. And, that's something else that I'd like to work on, or I am working on, is to try and get a functioning city council and that can back up all the things that can happen. And I don't know. One thing I do think is important in anything anybody does is, and looking at Julie, it reminds me, don't forget design. When you're going to put this much money and effort into something, don't build something ugly. So, yeah. I mean, what's the point? I remember one meeting we had with a contractor, and it was 5 units at 50th and Sheridan. I mean, it used to be a little dump. And so we did 5 units there. And as we were sitting down with the contractor, and we always used the same contractors, and they were friends. And he was going to make me take off the gables because it wasn't coming off. And it was my birthday. And he said, all right, I'll give you the gables for your birthday. And I got the gables for my birthday. So, but that comes when you're working with a group of people that are like family. I mean, they're friends, and we're not adversaries. We're trying to do the right thing, and we're together over and over and over again. So every time I walk by that, drive by that building, I think Pete Danino for the gift of the gables. Yeah.
I love that. Coming back to relationships, because really that's where so much meaning happens.
It's what it's all about. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially across functional teams, a lot of times what we do is we're just translating and helping everybody understand and align around what those goals are, so we can be in right relationship as we do work.
Yeah. Yeah.
One question I have for you, I'm not someone who fails with self-confidence usually. Yeah. But I know that can be a huge hindrance, especially as we all launch into work we want to do that we maybe don't have experience in. People saying, what do you know about these things, as we think them through and decide to do them, or even if we've got tons of experience and we're ready to go, that can be challenging. Like, did you ever suffer from having low self-esteem or feeling like, can I do this? Or like being worried about that at all?
I always thought we could do it somehow. And, somebody says no, you try again. And I mean, self-esteem, I don't know. I just always thought we could do it.
I love that. Maybe that actually, to circle back around, maybe that's one of your superpowers, is just when you know it's right for you, you're going to keep doing it.
Sometimes change our minds, but we still, sometimes we were wrong, but we change our mind and we did it for a reason and we keep going. But it wasn't drawback. But some things failed, they just failed. There were times when we had beautifully designed projects that didn't go through. So that I've still got pictures of some of them. But
do you have any you want to share? I mean, one of my favorite questions to ask is, have you ever faced what felt like insurmountable circumstances? And I think this is just one of the things about being human. Like, there's losses or challenges we go through in life that sometimes feel like, I don't know how to move forward or how to relate to this. And then we do, we just keep moving, or we adapt, or we change. Have you ever felt that way, in life or in your work?
Yeah, we had a huge project in St. Paul that we thought was great. It was going to be a new village, and the times just weren't right. And we went as far as we could with it. We built, models and tried what we could, and it just didn't work. So that's when we failed on. But that was just, there was no way to pull it out of the fire at that particular time. It was a time when lenders weren't lending. And so I don't think we had the political support that we should have had. And it just didn't come together. But I got pictures.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Coming back kind of to the theme, you've lived around the world, you've built quite a few things, you focus on creating housing because you believe humans need it and it's an area, a focus that's worthwhile. But now sitting here, how do you relate to the idea of home into family? What is it?
For me now?
Yeah, how do you relate to what home is?
Well, I'm 84 years old now, and home is, it's where we are, but things change so fast when you're 84. You're watching people that you know and love leaving. And so home is a little bit different because it's, at this age, the communities are thinning out, but it's still, we have children, grandchildren. We've got a whole new generation to watch, and that's just the cycle of life.
Yeah, to think about all of what we do and spend our energy on, and to also, I hope, enjoy this season of life with some calm too. That's many decades of working and raising kids, and when you're spirit-led, you have good energy, you want to keep doing it. But in this season of life, do you enjoy a different pace?
No. No.
Just as busy?
Yeah, really. I do a lot at the University of Minnesota. I'm on the real estate committee. We're working on a huge project that could be, I'm only on the advisory committee, so I'm not looking for financing or anything like that, but we're looking at building a project that could be 1 million square feet of research that interfaces with the private sector and the public sector right on the edge of campus, and it could be really exciting.
It's amazing.
So, yeah, no, I keep busy, and you keep your brain churning, I think, rather than like reclining into a recliner.
Oh, Peggy, I so appreciate the legacy that you left and your willingness to spend time with me today. I have not paid any attention to my team, who's probably been queuing me on timing quite a bit, but
Oh, yeah.
I would love to shift also to the room to see if anyone else would want to ask Peggy any questions.
I want to know what you faced as a young woman in a pretty male-dominated field. What was that like? Did you have problems? Did you have issues with that respect? Either in a council chambers or when you're proposing a project. Just interested.
Well, we had a male partner, so that helped. And he was very well respected. But honestly, in Minneapolis, we had a woman mayor, we had many women city council people. I'm not sure the woman thing made a lot of difference. How about you, Linda?
I agree with that. There were a couple times early on in the construction. We had a long-term relationship with one construction company, and the first time I went on site, this was in Brainerd, all of a sudden I felt they all were quiet, and I couldn't figure out why they were so quiet. And I came back for the second month's draw, and all of the pictures on the walls had been removed, and they never said one thing. But they knew that they had had all the, calendars on the wall, and all of a sudden they just were meeting with me, and they went,
We can't have that.
"We can't have that."
Playboy
And
calendar.
it was so interesting because they never said a thing to me.
Yeah.
And I went, well, that was interesting. And I didn't say a thing to them because this is the way it was back then, that the construction trailers were all male dominated place. And they had a lot of girly pictures on the walls. I mean, that's just what it was.
Mhm.
So that was the closest I got to seeing that.
But I think it's along the way politically and so forth, I don't think we were discriminated against at all. I think sometimes it worked in our favor. Just because of the relationships. I mean, Sharon Sales Belton called us.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I have like 3 questions in one.
Good.
Okay. So the first one would be, what was the most difficult thing, or how difficult was it for you to start out in development in the beginning in affordable housing? The second one was, how did you go about finding your team whose mission aligned with yours? And then the third one is, what advice would you give someone that's just now getting into the development space in affordable housing that's coming from the human services sector?
Wow. 1, 2, 3. What was it like in the beginning? We started small. The first project I did was 8 units. And honestly, the reason we got picked, I think, by MHFA was because my partner at that time and I had worked for the senator who chaired the housing committee over at the legislature. And so I think they knew that we had a connection to Frank Knoll. Frank Knoll had a connection to their budget. And sure, we'll take these 2 girls with the 8-unit project. So that kind of helped. I mean, connections really, really, really do help. And not being tunneled just on what you're doing, but being out in the community and meeting people and knowing people. So when you need to connect the dots are already there. And so I think that really helped. I forgot the next question.
You locate your team of people whose mission aligned with yours.
That's an interesting question. Well, the first person, we interned together and we're still friends. She lives at Washburn. I can flick my lights at her at night. We've stayed together all these years. But how I found Linda and Dick, I don't know. Dick had been chair of the housing authority when we did those interviews, when I asked the question, why is everything so ugly? So I knew Dick that way. Linda was a neighbor of mine, and she was in market research and had a different set of skills, and we just decided to give it a shot. Now, Linda and I were lucky because we were married to people who had a salary, and so for the first, I don't know how many years, we didn't take a salary. Yeah, a couple of years. So that was a privilege that we had, that people don't always have. But I would say if you're getting going, get out in the community, know what's needed, get to know the people that are going to help you. That's all I know. Just connect the dots, get to know some dots.
Get to know the dots.
Yeah, get to know the dots. Find some dots.
What would little Peggy be most proud of, looking at the whole span of your life?
My kids. Yeah, there they are. And my grandkids. I mean, really, it comes back to that. How could you not just feel that's the most important thing?
You're 84 and you're still at it. You're still going. I love that. You remind me a lot of my 82-year-old father who works in his yard 12 hours a day.
Good.
What is the one project that you wish someone else would take over and make happen? What do you want to see for this space? What do you want to have happen that maybe you're not directly involved with, but you would love to see happen?
Oh my gosh. If we were in business now, I would be looking for the downtown, bringing the downtown back, and looking for buildings that would make sense to be converted into housing. And I'd look for buildings that have no use anymore and maybe some open space, because I think we're going to need open space downtown if we're going to make it work. But I think that's the challenge for now. And I wish I was still working, because that'd be fun to do work on the downtown. But others are doing it, and I think with all the other roaring neighborhoods like North Loop, this neighborhood, East Bank, so forth, I think it's gonna come back. But it's it'll come back.
You still have your mind with us. You are still involved, and it's clear that you're still inspired.
Well, and politically, seriously, we need a city council that's more reasonable. So that's my political statement. But
The whole point of not talking about politics, mostly out of respect for the sacred middle way of that, our opinions together help us figure out what will work best. So I love that Barry talked to us about more cyclical, consensus-based decision making. And I think we all get to consider, how do we better communicate and respond and represent we the people and all our relations? The other things, communicating and asking us to consider how we can do this differently and break apart the systems that don't work for us and co-create new ones. So I think that's very possible in Minneapolis. As long as people don't just keep trying to conquer each other here, we can find that way forward together. And does anyone else have any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
uh-oh.
First, the way they hit the zoning for housing, rural Minnesota, 80 acres, it's a single family.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be made for a certain reason as far as industry, capital, and all those things. Do you see zoning changing in the future where you have multi-generational, extended families, and that zoning kind of softening a little bit to allow a mother-in-law, father-in-law suite in the backyard? Or how the 30-somethings coming up can't get started because housing is so expensive.
So expensive.
Do you see any movement in public policy in that area as far as zoning?
Yeah, I'm not up to speed as much as I should be, but I know that auxiliary units are now being welcomed in neighborhoods. And the problem is when people kind of take advantage of that and do auxiliary units that are actually fourplexes or something. But having auxiliary units makes total sense. You're making the city more dense and more workable. And that's what the school site that we worked on, Dartmouth, was all about. They all had auxiliary units, and I know that now professors live in those units, and some of their graduate students live in the auxiliary, or their mother-in-law, and I can see a lot of that happening, making it, that core, more dense and more, makes sense, share the resources, and so forth. But I'm not a zoning expert. Do you have any insights, Julie, or no?
I mean, that's been very much a discussion. It was in the 2030 Minneapolis plan that the neighborhoods really pushed back on. So there's a lot of discussion where actually Minneapolis and St. Paul aren't very pro regulations that allow you to do that or kind of hit that middle density. Our requirements to get through public process here are really expensive. So if you have a smaller project, by the time you go through that and meet all those requirements, you really can't make money. So I like to talk about how these models work so that we can not just be angry it's not happening, that we can really consider how do we change the dynamics that are preventing that from happening. I think ADUs are a great opportunity to allow people to bring densification into the city, but we also need to explore regulations around just mid-density and requirements to get through public process here.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot to
Complicated.
consider. Go ahead, Peggy.
No, I just said it's complicated. Some of those zoning laws allowed single-family, by the university, you can see it, single-family house to go down, and they plopped up a 16-plex or something like that in the same space. And that, you gotta say that might not be the highest and best use and the way to complement the neighborhood. So you have to kind of watch what the side effects are. But auxiliary units are definitely coming.
I think Barry's question gets at too, like we structurally develop things for a prototype, and does that prototype reflect humanity? I don't know that it does, and how we want to cohabitate and share resources, or how we want to live intergenerationally or support each other. I think there's a lot of gaps there, and so in real estate, we get to ask, do we keep evolving our product to better meet the humans that are using our spaces?
Right. Exactly.
It's a great question. Well, if we're done with questions, I'd like to invite all of you to stay for a happy hour. It actually looks calm enough. We can go enjoy that patio. We are releasing, as always, a long format video of this interview that gets released on YouTube, so you can listen to Barry outside of the prayer and just enjoy this. So thank you to all the listeners who join us that way. We also release shorter format videos or reels that are focused on the great core values that Peggy shared with us. So I'll spend some time meditating. I think we all will. And I really want to thank you again. I want to thank all of you for bringing depth of presence, your energetic involvement that contributes significantly to how this goes. And it takes a lot to share your life experience with other people. So thank you all. And join me in again thanking Peggy.
And if you go out on the deck and look at what we see out there, help us imagine what this space could be. And it should have something to do with what Barry's doing and so forth. And so this space is looking for a home, a vision. So
We get to
help
time
us out.
travel again and imagine the future we want to create.
Yeah. So anyway, have a look. It's worth it. Thank you.
Thank you.